guys are doing in technical services about our traffic system.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that, Derrick. There's a lot of things that we've done recently in our technical service department with regard to our traffic signals. One of the things that we've most recently done that you'll be able to see readily is that we've been able to sequence our downtown street lights in a nearly perfect pattern. In the past, they've always been sequenced within the grid. And with that grid, we have sequenced our lights to where if you're traveling north on Grand, for example, and you get the green light at Main Street, you're going to get a green light at Main, and then Broadway, and then Randolph, and then Maple. All of those lights are going to turn green at exactly the same time. And from that point, you've got nearly 1 minute to get from there all the way through all 4 intersections if that's what you want to do. And the same thing is happening a block to your west as you're on Independence. Same sequence, same direction, same thing is happening as all the lights are turning green at exactly the same time. And you go over to Washington, you get the same thing. So all the northbound traffic is moving at the same time through Enid. Once that 50 seconds to a minute is up, it switches to yellow and then red, and instantly, all at the same time, it switches to the east-west flow. So east-west is going to all be green at the same time. In the past, we've had problems with timing on those intersections because each intersection was on its own controller and therefore it was on its own clock. And as you know, clocks may drift a little. They may have a little bit different time. Just a few seconds can mean a lot, especially when you're trying to go somewhere. That's no longer there. We're hooked up to a network and we're on the network clock, so they're all exactly the same. Now, there are 2 exceptions to that. The first one is the Kenwood leg at Washington and Randolph. That 5th approach requires that we borrow time from the other approaches, and we take roughly 7 seconds off of one of those approaches to give it to Kenwood should someone come into that zone. And we detect them and we give them that time. And then the controller will do its math and it'll catch it back up and get back in sequence with the other intersections. Now, when it comes to Maple and Grand, that intersection in the past has always been on detection for the east-west approaches there on Maple. We have since taken that off of detection and put it onto the timing pattern so that whenever you're coming up Grand, that 4th light there is going to sequence with the others, and you're going to be able to continue on Grand rather than have to stop a platoon of traffic for one car approaching on Maple. Now, it's a 50-second wait. If you do get caught on Maple and you have to wait, yes, it's 50 seconds. But if you're coming all the way through on Maple, you'll catch both lights and you won't have to worry about one or the other. You're going to get a free pass all the way through there. And you may know in the middle of the night, the lights downtown, they flash red, except for Grand Street. Grand flashes yellow, and that's the north-south. And people have asked, well, why don't we have the east-west? Because those are, predominantly traveled more, but our fire and rescue need that quick movement up Grand Street or down Grand Street should they need to get through. So we leave it on yellow, and we have the other intersections on red. Okay. So that's something new on the timing side downtown that we've done, and then I just want to kind of expand on why the things are the way they are at night with the flashing lights.
Okay.
So
now I know I have noticed some improvements on our ONK Garrett. Tell us, what have you done specifically on ONK Garrett and perhaps even on Van Buren with the traffic flow? What have you done? Oh, I love that question. We have worked diligently on getting our traffic flow to optimize, if you will. We've invested in the software and in the licensing that we need for 14 intersections here in Enid. The 14 core intersections, if you will, are on Van Buren from Randolph south to York, okay, which includes the ones that are close together down in that area, Broadway, Main, Randolph, and Oklahoma. And then you have ONK Garrett, and then you have York, okay? So that's really 5 with ONK Garrett. Well, we have 14 licenses for these intersections, so you go out east-west, you start at Leona Mitchell, and then you go all the way out to Overland Trail. Those are the other part of that 14. So with that, what we have is, if we're looking north here, okay, and this is Van Buren, and this is Garrett. We're going to start with this being York, okay, and this is Oklahoma, and we got Main, Broadway, and we've got Randolph,
okay? Kind of a footnote here, these two intersections are sized exactly the same, okay? They're big intersections. They have the 4 approaches that you're used to. They also have 4 left turn yellow flashing arrows, protected yellows, if you will. And they have 4 pedestrian crossings, each one of them, so they're exactly the same. This one is a little bit smaller. It doesn't have east-west flashing arrows. And it also does not have any pedestrian crossings. So it actually needs less time. But if you're going to sequence these, you have to have them all have the same amount of time. So you come down here to Oklahoma, it has no arrows, it has no peds. So it's the smallest of them all. So how do we make all of these things work together when there's so many different sizes of shapes requiring different times or different amount of times? So with the software that we bought, it basically takes all this information in over a period of time. In the beginning, I believe it's 10 days. And in 10 days, it will gather the data. And then at that point, it asks us to optimize or not optimize. And if we want to optimize, we accept it, we push the button, and it'll improve the flow. The next morning, we get the same question, optimize or not optimize, accept or decline. We accept, and it'll improve the flow. And every day that we do this, it gets better and better. We may decline it if we know that we've had a major accident or incident in the area that would affect the flow, or if we had a big football game or some other event, a concert that really interrupted the flow, we may decline that because we don't want that being part of the norm. So we'd take that out of the equation. So the software will continue to work on this. Now I know from experience, we drove the other day from the north to the south when we topped the overpass right up here and we were going southbound. We seen green lights here from the bottom of the overpass, and we drove it, and we drove all the way through to here and got in this left turn lane, and we never caught a red. So it was a beautiful thing for me. It tells me that it's working. It tells me that the algorithms in the system are in check and they're working like we want them to. We have the same thing going east-west, you know, where you have Leona Mitchell, and then you have Grand, and you have Independence, and you have Monroe, and you come out here to Johnson and Cleveland and Hoover and Overland Trail, right? So the same thing is going to happen on this corridor as what's going to happen on this corridor. The problem that we really struggle with is right here, because this has to flow like this and also like this.
Right.
And this guy's got to flow like that and also like that.
Right.
So we want to move traffic through town from stem to stern eventually, move the whole platoon of cars through there. The unfortunate part is the folks that are sitting here at this light are going to have to wait a little bit. If they're sitting over here at this light, they're going to have to wait a little bit. But the needs of the many up and down this street and up and down this street will outweigh the needs of the few or the one guy sitting right there.
Like Oklahoma.
Now, I stole that from Star Trek, but that's okay.
So there's Oklahoma, and what other streets were there?
This one's Oklahoma, okay, and Maine, and Broadway, and Randolph. Okay. And then this is the overpass, and I'll get rid of that. And here we have Monroe, okay, and this is York over here. And your office is like right here, right?
Yep.
Okay. So that's kind of what we've done in the recent, I'm going to say in the last 18 months.
Good.
I think the problem, you know, if we had any struggles at all, it was with the network. It requires a lot of data. You know, it's ones and zeros data. It's not that much, but when you bring it all in and you're building it up over time, it becomes a serious amount of data. So we count on that software to read that data, to put that together, and then optimize the traffic flow from what it's telling us to do. Now there's a thing called the Purdue diagram, which is a chart that we can pull that will show the arrivals on green. And what arrivals on green mean is we want to optimize to where we have the most arrivals on green.
Now you were talking about earlier about declining and accepting the optimization or not.
Yes.
Tell me why you would do one or the other one again.
Well, we would almost always accept the recommendations that the software is making, with the exception of a known event that would have changed the norm. If you had a emergency situation where traffic was blocked or rerouted around an accident, for example, at Randolph and Van Buren, then you do not want those calculations in your formula the next day, because that's what's going to happen. It's going to mess up that flow, thinking that that's the norm. So if you have a major event like a concert, and you let the traffic out and they are guided towards O&K Garriott to go east or west, that portion of time, if that's 11 o'clock at night, you don't want that information affecting the flow for the next night and the next night and the next night, right? So you'd leave that out, so you would not accept it. So in the perfect world, you would accept the recommendations that the software is making. The software is called Syntrax. So just so everyone knows. And it's used a lot. We found out about it through our friends in Stillwater. I went over there and did a field trip, if you will, and met with my counterpart for the city of Stillwater. And they really use Syntrax a lot for optimizing flow of the OSU football traffic out of town after a football game. They can turn every light green at an exit, okay? So, or not at an exit, but at an exodus out of the city to get everyone out of there. So the same thing happens in Norman. I spoke with my counterpart there, and they have the same software for the same process. Other than optimizing flow on a routine basis, they can use this same software program to write in schedules, start and stop times for this traffic to leave town. And that's a moving thing too, because everyone knows we have games at 11, we have games at 1, we have games at 6, we have games on Thursday night. And so we know with that in mind, that's where Syntrax got its start. And then it became a real useful tool just in the management of traffic flow for corridors, for major corridors. With these 14 licenses that we have, we should be able to optimize what we have at Van Buren and Garriott on these 14, and at some point take these licenses and move them out to the west from Oakwood all the way to Garland and get those in tune too with what we have at Overland Trail. So it goes that way fine. And then back to the east, 10th and 42nd is all we have, so there wouldn't be a whole lot there.
Okay. So as you mentioned, way OSU do their traffic lights to get people, so people can exodus,
right.
exit out of the city. We can do anything similar with downtown, or like for the Strybank Center, or?
If we had a concert, we have the technology. However, we do not at this point have the training. That's going to take some supplemental training to learn how to do. We do have the vendor support, who I want to commend, that would come in and help us with that. It's something that once you learn it, you just need to be able to utilize it often enough so that you don't forget. I mean, I'm sure there are job aids and things like that that can help our guys at any point in time, but at this point, I don't know that we have a big problem with the exodus here in Enid anyway, because when you leave the concert, you can go just about any direction from that Stride Bank Center on 2 streets north-south for sure, and you're almost right on top of O&K Garriott, which is a good 4-lane state highway. So if it should become a need, we would need plenty of advance notice to get the training that we need and implement that, and I really don't know that the benefit would be there, not at this point in time.
So how long has this new system been in place, and how long will residents be able to see the full effect of it? Does it take 6 months, a year, or?
It's been in place for about 1.5 years, and it's been working functionally for probably 3 or 4 months now.
Tell me the difference when you say functionally.
Well, in that it is on a network. We had some difficulties getting the information from the controller at the intersection back to us where the software is, back to our server, and then from our server to our desktops where we can choose to optimize or not. And because if it's not on the network, the intersections are not talking to each other. Syntrax is not knowing what to do with this information, and it's not being told yes or no to optimize. So now that it's on a network, this independent network that we have, now we're able to try to get the most out of it. Now, as far as when will it be fully optimized, it's close now. I mean, there's not a lot more that we can do other than improve the intersections themselves. And I'll say that on our schedule now, we're hoping to be able to rebuild Oklahoma in Van Buren and rebuild York and Van Buren in the next year or so. So if those things come to fruition, That will help because the intersections will be the same size as Broadway and Randolph, because they'll have to have pedestrian crossings because of ADA law. Mm-hmm. So all of those improvements will be made, and it will make it easier for us and easier for Syntrax to do its job. So there's that. So I think we're in good shape now. The next goal would be to move it to the west and pick up those intersections.
I noticed recently that you were making improvements to the actual traffic poles, I guess, is what you call it, like at Independence and Garriott?
That's correct. We are in the process of remodeling that intersection with all new supports. That's what we call our poles, is the supports, and then the mast arms that go out over the intersection, the heads with the new lights in them, and new lighted street signs. It's going to be very nice, very similar to what we have at Grand in Garriott. And that should go online today or tomorrow. This week, almost for certain, we should be live and operating on our new intersection. And then the process of removing the old facilities in that area begin. And I believe our engineering department, they're working on completing the job and getting the sidewalks, and getting the ADA, the crosswalks, and all of that in tune with what it needs to be. We needed to do this with these intersections because of the propensity for a larger truck to make a turn and actually hit our pole and create a damage and a risk of a pole falling. So we've moved the locations of those to try to improve that. And then also, when we did that, it gives us the opportunity to change the radiuses on those turns to where that'll accommodate those turning trucks, if you will. We have furniture trucks, we have food trucks, things like that that need to get down in the downtown area. And we want to help them get through there safely.
So we're here at Willow and Van Buren, and there's several components to an intersection. Those components consist of the cabinet, which is directly in front of us. And as we scroll up on the support, the first thing we come to is the mast arm going out over the intersection. And above that, on the outside to the left, that is our preemption device. As you scroll up a little higher, there's a little white radio pointed to the south. That's our network radio. And then as we go out onto the light that's out there, that's the mast arm for our Cobra Head street light. The first device on that is a Ruckus radio. This is for our data collection for our water meters. And above that is our detection camera.
Let's talk about those different types of traffic lights, the one that have red on and then a green light saying you can go left.
Sure.
Let's talk about that.
It can be confusing if it's something that you're not used to seeing. Enid, we have a lot of intersections like that. I had my wife point out to me that I needed to go when I'm sitting at the light, and it says it's red, and she says it got a green arrow. I said it's red. We had our little conversation, and then I went ahead and left, and people behind me are honking. But anyway, I did a little bit of research on this, and I've talked to some traffic engineers, and this is basically a calming effect, if you will. When that red light is on, the red lights are on everywhere except for your green arrow, okay? So it calms everything. We don't want to confuse the drivers to your right at all by them seeing anything green. So you got to, across the board, you got 3 red lights, and then you have your little arrow that tells you can go. This was built in for safety purposes, and if you'll look in your driver's handbook, under signals or intersections, you will find that this is pretty well the norm. And it says you may proceed on green even if there is a red on the same head. So it's in your driver's handbook. It is part of the traffic design or the engineering of the intersection. And once you figure that out, once you're used to it, it's like anything else. It's the norm. It's where the expectation is set for the driver behind the wheel. They know what to expect. That's what it's there for.
Okay. Tell me about stop bars.
Stop bars are also known as stop lines. They're the white line at the intersection where you stop. And normally in front of the stop bar at a lot of intersections, you'll also have a crosswalk. So we ask the public to not go past the stop bar and into the crosswalk. It's not very courteous to block the crosswalk, right? So we ask that you don't do that, and in addition to stay behind the stop bar. And the reason is because our detectors are looking at a zone within that lane. And it starts at the stop bar and goes back away from the intersection to the advanced detection area. If you pull ahead of the stop bar, the camera detection system is no longer going to see you. The radar detection system is no longer going to see you, and it's going to drop you like a hot potato. Now you're sitting there wondering why the light won't change. So if you stay behind the stop bar, you're not going to make it any better by scooting up and scooting up. Once you're in there, you're in there. You're in the queue.
That's good to know. I'm sure a lot of residents have made the mistake of going through there and thinking that it will make the traffic progress,
Sure.
but actually it's delaying it.
Yes, it
So
is.
that is very good. White signs downtown, do we have the downtown area?
I'm glad you asked me about that. We've recently changed the intersection at Randolph and Washington and Kenwood to white signs with black text and then the City of Enid logo. And the reason for that is because it's a central business district, and the white signs indicate that this is a central business district. And they're up on our mast arms of the intersection signal lights, and you'll see those. And it also gives it a, I've used this word several times, a nostalgic feel, right, for our downtown area. And so what we're doing is we're going to slowly, I say slowly, within the next few weeks, get those changed out, the entire 13 intersections in our downtown area, to all black text on white background. And if we do it right, we'll have it completed before the parade next month.
Very good. We have another question. Distracted drivers, cell phones, that type of thing.
Yes, sir.
Do they disturb the flow of traffic?
Oh, absolutely, they do. We see this all too often, particularly, you know, when a person is sitting at a light, somewhere in the row of cars that is ready, waiting for the light to turn green, someone's on their cell phone, and they're looking down and they're not paying attention to the traffic or the lights themselves, and inevitably the light turns green and the traffic takes off, and there's that one person that's sitting there on their cell phone. And then they realize when they get the honk, hey, I gotta go. They look up and they wave in the mirror and they take off, right? Well, they may make it through the intersection, but my detection system has already dropped that particular flow of traffic because there's a gap. This person has created this gap, and it's a gap in my cycle. And so if it's no longer there, the equipment is not going to give time to something that's not there, so it stops. So this person may make it through, but everyone behind them is going to stop and wait again. So when you get stuck at an intersection, look around at your fellow drivers. You all look at each other and agree, we're all going to go at once, right? So let's all shake hands and take off and go on down the road. So.
Yeah, I love that.
All right.
Okay. Tell me some other things about maybe the traffic light detection. How do they know you're there? Tell me some more things.
Sure. Detection is, you know, in the old days and not that long ago here in the city, we had what we call loops. And loops are an inductive pickup wire. It's a coil that's in the street underground, and it's sealed in there. And by making several loops of wire and connecting it to the electricity inside the cabinet, it creates an inductive pickup. So when something metal comes across it, it knows that there is a car there, or a motorcycle, or whatever it may be. Some of them are so sensitive they can tell how many axles there are. So, but loops are expensive to repair. Loops are not really very good whenever you have snow and ice, because you got plows going over them, and that tends to get into the sealant, which lets water in, and water and electricity don't go together. So loops, although many people will argue that they're very robust, they do have problems. So we've chose at the city to go with detection mounted on our mast arms and on our cobra heads, our street lights, if you will. And the higher up we can get those, the better. And what we do with that is we aim the camera at the intersection for the oncoming traffic, and we put our little box in there. It's a digital box that tells the system when you pull into that zone, you're in the queue, you're ready. No matter where this is in its cycle, you're in there. So we also have radar detection, and we have radar and camera combination detection. One of those systems is out at 42nd Street, for example, and that's a high-speed approach. Speed limit's 45, but people are generally running 50 to 55, and we have big trucks there. So we want to have the most advanced detection system we could get. So we put that in out there, and the goal is to not have the truckers come into town to have to slam on the brakes at the first intersection they come to. So if you're running the speed limit and you're coming into the advanced detection zone, chances are my controller's going to give more time so you don't have to stop. It'll make these guys wait a little longer. The folks that are running north and south there may have to wait a little longer, but we want to not create a problem for the big trucks and the traffic coming into town. It's also our city image. It's not good to have the first thing that you come into when you get to Enid is have to stop at the first light and wait. You know, a minute and a half, I'm sitting here waiting at the very first light. What's that tell you about the next one? So our goal is to have that light and that image of the city come on in, right? And of course, it's the same way going out. We have to have that flow, and that detection system has really made for vast improvements out there.
Very good.
And throughout the city, for the most part, we've upgraded our detection systems over the course of the last few years. We have a few intersections to go, and we'll be able to bring all of them online. We have most of them online now, and we can actually visually see from our computer screens in our offices what's going on at that intersection. We can see the traffic. And one thing to keep in mind, if you're sitting in a light and you're not getting a green and everyone else is going, and it cycles and everybody gets to go again but you, please dial this number and let us know during normal operating hours. The number is 616-7336. That's our traffic central control, if you will. And most of the time we do have someone there. Not always. We have 4 people that work on these. Out of all of the city's lights, we've got 50 intersections. We've got 4 dedicated young men that are getting after it out there. If they're there, which, like I said, most of the time we'll have at least one there, they'll take the call and they can pull this intersection up and probably see you sitting there, and they'll give you a green light. But better than that, they can start diagnosing right then and there what's going on. Now, we can't go back in time because these systems do not record. There is no way to go back and look at an accident or no way to go back and look at anything like that. So it's all live feed, and that's it. But if it's doing it now, there may be a reason. It could be washed out by the sun. You know, contrast is very important with cameras, right? You got to have that contrast just right. Well, we get glare from the road, we get glare from the sun, we get snow, fog, heavy rain. A lot of these things will impact our detection's ability to see that. But that's still an improvement over the loops and some of the older style of detection.
So do you get bird nests or spiders?
We had a bird nest recently. Really? Yes. One of your crew in the studio actually frequents that intersection, and it was 42nd Street. And we actually had I couldn't tell you what kind of birds they were, but they were babies, and they were all the way up inside the housing underneath this camera detection system. Wow. And we carefully took them out, and we carefully placed them where the mama could find them and got them out of there, and put some chicken wire up in there to keep them out. So.
Okay. Do emergency vehicles affect traffic flow? I mean, the detection system, the preemptive system, at all?
They do. You're right. It's a preemption detection, if you will. At each intersection, in relation to the fire department, as they roll, they have an emitter on their truck that will tell the intersection that the direction of travel that they're going ahead of them by as much as a half a mile, it will turn that light green. And the first thing it's going to do is going to turn everything red and stop all traffic. And then it's going to turn green for the travel of the fire truck, okay, and clear that intersection, and then the fire truck can come through. So it serves 2 purposes. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So we have those at every one. When you look at the little black thing up on the mast arm, mm-hmm. or maybe even on the pole, it's just a little small sensor, and it's got an input, and it detects that emitter, and then, you know, that's good for the person that's in need of help. But the effect is that we do have other people that have to wait, and now all of that timing that we had and sequencing and a flow that we had is gone. But fortunately, Syntrax, click, 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 and we're back and running. I mean, within 1 to 2 cycles, we're right back on track. Okay. So in the past, that wasn't the case. So there's another benefit of Syntrax. Now we're going to open up the traffic cabinet and take a look inside. So this is where all of the brains are that control your intersections, Enid. The first thing you'll notice is the main controller. This device controls every call 24/7, 365. It has to be very robust, and it has to be able to be programmed, adjusted, tweaked as necessary.
So here I'm going to show you how some of our controllers can be programmed to operate in different ways at different times of the day. So here, if we go to main menu, we can look at time base and then action plan. And on these action plans, we can set up for the controller to operate in a certain pattern. We can set it to work in Flash at certain times of the day, but most of the time, for the main corridors at the very least, we have it set into coordination, where multiple controllers throughout the intersections around town will operate and will communicate with each other so that they allow for a green passage all the way through town as much as possible. Another option is to set the controller into free, which will separate it from the coordination plan and allow it to just give calls as it needs to. And that, the action plans are set up here, and then they can be then scheduled right here on the day plan at different times. This is a test controller, so we don't have any set at the moment.
Over here on the right, this is a MMU, which stands for Malfunction Management Unit, or a conflict monitor. In the old days, they called them conflict monitor. And basically, it's the parent of the system. And what it does is it monitors every action that the controller is taking. And in the instance that something terrible happened and we had green going on opposing traffic, the conflict monitor would throw the intersection into flash, into red flash. We have a board over here. Earlier we talked about emergency vehicles and how emergency vehicles need to get the right of way. Take a close look at this. This is the sensor that we've seen on the pole. And this sensor, when it's triggered by a flashing light at the right frequency, will turn the approach that is wired to red first and then give it a green. It stops all traffic and then gives it a green. And this is simulating what is on the front of a fire truck.
What a very good advanced system. I think this is going to be very good for our city.
Absolutely. I'm proud of it, and I want to leave, one of these days I'm going to retire, and I want to leave a really good set of equipment and the software and everything that anybody needs to be able to come in here and say, hey, you know, we don't need a whole lot of anything because it's already done. I do have a 5-year plan for our signals. We're on year 1 of that 5-year plan, and actually I think we'll probably finish my 5-year plan in 4 years. So, and at a very modest price, if you ask me. So,
can you give me a sneak peek of some of that 5-year plan?
Well, sure. We want to do, this year we're going to be adding detection at Oakwood and Randolph and at Oakwood and Willow. Those are 2 older systems. They're there, and people would think, well, that one out at Oakwood's not that old, but believe it or not, it's an old black and white detection system. You don't get the ability to really fine-tune things out there with that, especially from a remote standpoint. So we're doing that. We're going to add 8 new signal cabinets this year. That will bring all of our cabinets pretty much up to date, with the exception of a few. We're going to add 4 more new detection systems, preemption systems. We'll have those installed this year. And then in the same year, we're also going to be rebuilding York and Van Buren and rebuilding Oklahoma and Van Buren. And we also plan on, you know, in the coming years, each year we're going to try to improve our battery backups. In each intersection, we need to have a battery backup should OG&E power be lost. Anytime you lose the utility power, those signal lights still need to run for public safety. And so we've invested a lot already in our battery backups, but there are still areas that need it, and we even need it downtown, probably as much as anything. Those battery backups are there and they work, but they only work for maybe an hour, maybe 2 at the most. They're like car batteries inside these things. Okay. But the technology these days, and with the LED lamps that we have overhead now, you know, we don't need those type of batteries. We need gel cells, something along those lines. We put 48 volts in there. Those things can run 6 to 8 hours easily. And when they get to that point, when they get to a certain point, the system will automatically put the light into flash, and then we can run another 3 or 4 hours. So we also have notification. We'll be notified if we lose power. That's being put in as we speak, so that if we do lose power, we go on battery backup. we get an email, we get a text, and we can go out and make sure that none of our facilities have been damaged, and watch and see and help, and then be able to swap batteries if it's going to be over 8 or 9 or 10 hours. We can bring more batteries in and change them on the fly without affecting the intersection. So,
very good. Very good improvements.
Yeah.
Now, the school zone beacons. Tell us how you're improving that.
Okay. Well, in relation to our signals, we have a maintenance plan on our signals. And I'll hit on that first. On our traffic signals, with 50 signalized intersections here in Enid, in 52 weeks out of the year, right? I basically have set up a program in our software to send an email to our signal crew to go do maintenance work at each intersection, 1 per week, okay? And then we have the 2 weeks extra that we can use as floaters to do whatever we need to do, make adjustments in our schedule, someone's on vacation, etc. So every week we're doing this maintenance, okay? We started this in the very beginning out at Southgate. And so week 1 was Southgate, week 2 was, follow along with me now, week 2 was Moore, okay, week 3 was York, week 4 was Van Buren and Garriott, and so on, right on up through the north all the way to Purdue. And then we go out to Garland, and we work our way, I'll take that back, we go out to 42nd, we work our way west all the way to Garland.
Okay.
In those areas, as we're doing this once a week, right, any school zone that is within the vicinity of that intersection, we also do the maintenance to those school zone facilities. We look at the lights, the wiring, every connection. We vacuum out everything, clean it up, make sure it's neat. Insects, get them out of there. And that beacon is ready to roll, okay? Inside the school zone beacon cabinet, if you will, it's a small box, we have a component in there that is programmable. We program it from our desktop that sets the school schedules. So we can go in and do them all in blanket or copy and paste and send all of these schedules out so that they basically run maintenance free. They know when to come on, they know when to not come on, no school on the weekends, right? They know the holidays are pre-programmed. The only time we have a change is if there's a snow day or if the school decides that they're going to have a teacher day instead of a regular day. And if we're notified of those, we can easily go in and flip a switch and make that change. We have that, all of Enid Independent Schools, Chisholm, Pioneer, I guess that's probably it. There may be a few others there that we do that for. And what's really neat, when you have a beacon here, and you got a beacon here, and you got a school here, right? And here's your roadway. From right here, this is where my box is at that's got the little antenna on it that's sending information back to me, but it's also sending information to the World Wide Web. If you're in here and you have an app open in your phone called Travel Safely, and it's running in the background, and you exceed the speed limit from right there, your phone's going to start vibrating and buzzing and telling you to slow down. Every one of our schools are set up with that app, so that in between these beacons, if you're speeding, it's going to give you a warning inside your car. There's going to come a day, in probably not too distant future, where we may invest in the same technology at our intersections that will tell you that a fire truck is coming from behind. Okay? You may have the stereo going, you may be on your phone, not watching the lights, but if there's a fire truck behind you and you can't hear it, that's not good. So long term, I'm going to say 3 to 5 years, we may be able to add this into our cabinets, and maybe sooner, and have that technology well. There's always the argument from folks that we really don't want people even on their phones when they're driving and in traffic, but we know that it happens. It happens all the time, everywhere. Most of us have something going on with our phone in the car. If it's just sitting in your seat and it's running in the background, it's not going to hurt anything to notify you that you need to slow down. It's better that than the police officer telling you to slow down. So the app is called Travel Safely, and it's there. It's been there a while. It's working well within our school districts. You'll also be able to use this at a lot of school districts around the entire region, even up into Kansas. So Wichita has a lot of them. Stillwater, some of these other outlying cities, I'm not so sure, but I've seen maps where these schools are set up with this, and it's nice to know it's there.
So safety is a big part of what you guys are doing when it comes to traffic optimization, the
Yes.
flow of traffic. I know painting is in your area as well, painting the street. Tell us about what your improvements in relation to traffic lights and the painting. How's that?
You bet. The street markings is what we're talking about here, where you have the yellow paint, the yellow stripes down the center, and we have the white stripes on the edges and the shoulders. We paint all of our downtown area normally early in the year. We get all the north, south, east, west, the grid, if you will, downtown and get that done. And we really go all the way from, for instance, from Willow all the way down Washington until we get run out of places to go with our yellow paint. And we do the same thing on Independence and the same thing on Grand. And then we turn around and we go east-west, and we do those streets just as far as they go. Once we're done with those, we start just doing east-west streets. We'll do Randolph, then maybe we'll go up to Chestnut, we'll go up to Willow, and go up to Purdue, get all of those east-west streets, and then we'll go down and do the ones on the south side. We'll do Root, we'll do Southgate, okay? And then we'll do the same process with our north-south streets as we work throughout the town. And once we're done with that, we go back downtown and we put on a second coat, which we just recently finished. And then once that's done, we start the same process again. Randolph, and then Cleveland, and then Willow, and then Purdue, and then come back down and do Rope and Southgate. And that way we get our second coat on there. And then in the fall, as it starts to cool off, we can do the stop bar or the stop line at the intersections. We can do the turn arrows at the intersections. We do have to have the temperatures be good for the adhesives that we use, good for the paint that we use. We need quick drying times. I want the public to know that the paint that's coming out of that truck typically dries in 60 to 90 seconds on a bad day. On a good day, it's quicker than that. So if you stay out of the paint, it will dry and it'll look nice. If you're one of these that likes peeking around the traffic to see what's going on and you're driving in that yellow paint, you're doing two things. One, you're getting paint all over your car and your tires up in the treads. And two, you're marring that beautiful paint job that we just put on there. Not a lot of people know this, but we put reflective beads in the paint too. We shoot the paint down wet, and right behind us another gun that shoots beads right on top of it so that we get retroreflectivity at night. So all that's going on. So if you're behind a paint truck or behind a row of cars, just assume you're behind a paint truck if you can't see that big sign that says wet paint, and don't drive on our lines. Give it a chance to dry and cure, and then you'll be proud of what we've done when we're finished. We see areas where you see yellow lines going that way and yellow lines going that way where people just drove right through it without a care in the world. And it's frustrating when you put so much time and effort and energy preparing in the morning, getting ready and going out and setting up and doing a street sweeper and get it all going, and then one or two people will do that. Or they will have the nerve enough to pass, and when they do, it's dangerous. It's putting my men in peril. Plus, when you do it, then the people behind you are going to think it's okay. And now you start a process with clearing everybody out behind you. And that whole mess of paint that we just did is shot. So we ask the public to pay attention, be careful around the paint truck, don't drive in the paint, be patient, and you can be proud of the work when we're done with it.
So, street signs.
Hey, one of my favorite subjects, okay. We have countless, I want to say, street signs, not so much, but in the city of Enid, when I started 4.5 years ago, we had 70 signs in our software that were done, 70. We use a software called Cartograph. And I opened it for the first time and I looked at it and I seen we had 70 signs. Well, as it stands now, we've got over 7,000 signs in this software. Okay. And the way we did that was, the first thing we did was we did all of our arterials. Both of the major highways, Highway 64, and then the Willows, Purdue's, Roops, Southgate, all of those arterials. North, south, east, west, it didn't matter. And we put new street signs and new poles on every one of those intersections. We have to do the poles to be compliant because of the crash regulations. We put in the square poles with the holes in them. Those are called breakaway poles. So that if you hit it, it's just going to snap over, minimal damage. The old round poles, those things, very thick-walled, very dangerous, 2 inches in diameter, and they could really tear up something, okay? So the state decided to do away with those, go with these breakaway poles, so we've put in that many breakaway poles on top of all of these signs, or underneath them, I should say. And when we did that, we at that point in time, had already done a few neighborhoods. We had those out of the way, like Hunter's Hill and Heritage Hills. A couple of examples where we had done those. We had also done over in the Leona Mitchell area, had done those. And instead of just willy-nilly a neighborhood at a time, I just instructed my team, I said, I want you to go out east and just start working your way west. I want you to go up and down every street. And this was in the wintertime when we can't paint. So if it's warm, we're painting. But when it's cool, we're doing signs. And so we worked from east to west, and we blanketed the city over the course of the last 2 fall and winter seasons, and they're done, okay? Now we're going to start this winter when it turns cold enough where we can't paint. We're going to go back and get the other signs, like the no parking signs, the speed limit signs. We've already done the yields and the stops and the street signs. Those were our primary goal. Now we want to get all these other ones that are in there. And I can tell you, there's probably going to be another 7,000 or so of those, okay? And so that'll take a couple of winter seasons, and we'll get those done as well. And then we're done. Knock on wood, right? So that's what we're doing with our signs, what we're doing, how we're doing it. We try to take a systematic approach to everything that we tackle in tech services and look at something, see it, and nip it in the bud.
Very good.
Okay.